This is an Irreverent podcast. Check out irreverent.fm for shows from all our friends. Hi everyone, welcome to Evangelical. I have with me this week Tori Williams Douglas. Welcome to the show, Tori.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Likewise, and I'm really happy we were able to connect and talk. We actually initially connected over Twitter, and we've been a part of a number of different conversations. And I think you actually summarize a lot of your story, like within your Twitter bio. Like you actually say, "I was a conservative Christian until they lynched Mike Brown," and that's very that's a lot within just one sentence. So I know we're going to talk about a lot of that, but let's get a little bit of your background first. Where are you from? What's your background?
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I have always felt like my story, even as a kid, I've always felt like my story was just really weird. So I grew up here in Portland, Oregon, where I live now, and so I was my parents' first child, and so my dad is black, my mom is white. My dad grew up in Philadelphia. My mom grew up here in Oregon. And my parents met when they were living in Europe, and then moved back to Portland. They met at church, and they connected, and a large part of their connection, I guess I should say, had to do with spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
So their version of Christianity was kind of unique, I feel like. It definitely leaned towards kind of fundamentalism, but also there was a lot of like charismatic theology. Mm-hmm. Name it and claim it kind of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the lens through which we read the Bible, and that's like, those were the kinds of churches that we were going to. They were pretty socially, politically very conservative, and then with scripture it was just like anything goes, like whatever you there, you can make it. It's like plug and play, right? If you can make it work, like God will come through for you.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up in that environment. My parents would not allow me to attend public school, because I would be corrupted by the world. Of course, we can't have that. So, so I was homeschooled like K through 12, as were all of my siblings. And this sounds really terrible, and I've said it to my mom like as a joke before, but I'm kind of impressed my mom didn't drown us all in the bathtub. Because 5 kids is a lot. Like 5 kids you never get a break from. Like I couldn't do that. So,
that's wild.
yeah, for sure. So and my mom kind of like, my dad worked a ton, obviously, to like try to keep food on the table, and we were really super poor, but my dad worked his ass off always. Like church on Sunday was a non-negotiable. So it was always like the classic, do I have to go to church? No, you get to go to church.
Was that sort of were you one of the kids that asked, like, do I have to?
Yeah, I was. Like,
Yeah, definitely.
It was like Sunday morning and Sunday evening and Wednesday night.
Oh, yeah.
So, it was like, it was a lot. But I was motivated to go in large part because that was my only real social outlet, and I'm a really big extrovert. So most of the time I did want to go to church. just to like see people, get out of the house, be around other humans I wasn't related to. Um, so that was kind of yeah, that was kind of my whole childhood. I didn't really question it. My parents are my mom mostly, but both my parents are very politically involved. Um, Oregon's a pretty consistently blue state for as long as I can remember. But my mom was involved with like Eagle Forum um, and other kind of initiatives to like make abortion illegal, which they've tried to do in Oregon lots of times and it hasn't happened. And I'm trying to think of like what else but it's kind of those kinds of initiatives that were very classically like I don't know evangelical.
Hmm.
We're going to take over the government, like we're going to train our kids to be really good at I don't know like apologetics and
Yeah.
we're going to study Latin and have really good arguments so that when people try to tell us that like God didn't literally create the world in 6 days, we are always going to have an answer. So um, that was really like gist of my childhood and yeah, like I didn't question that at all while I lived at home, like not even a little bit.
Hmm.
Um, so
So what
yeah.
was your homeschool curriculum? Was it one of the ones that is sort of common within evangelical circles as far as a Becca or one of the other or the Bob Jones like curriculum, or was
Um,
because I I'm learning more and more about the homeschool sort of movement and everything, but it's sort of I feel like it's very much roll your own, and even though there are all these curriculums that are very popular. So as far as the way you were taught at home and being homeschooled throughout K through 12, how was that for you?
so it was always explicitly a religious curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
So first grade through, or sorry, kindergarten, I guess, through eighth grade, we used Rod and Staff, which is a Mennonite curriculum. Um, that was way more conservative than even my parents were.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
Yeah, and then after that, for high school, we use Christian Liberty, and they kind of piece stuff together. So I think that they use some of Becca and some of the other more popular kind of Christian um, homeschool textbooks. So they kind of build it the way that they think that your particular student will need it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so it was mostly the big names. Like once I got into high school, so
Gotcha.
yeah.
And as far as you mentioned that you attended sort of charismatic leaning churches. What were the church environments like for you?
Um, so church, I mean, there were lots of prayer meetings. There were people being slain in the spirit. Um, we would definitely sing the same song for like 20 or 30 minutes over and over and over again because, the spirit was moving and quit. So, yeah, that was interesting. Retrospect, at the time, like I had no idea. Like that was all I knew.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and then once I basically like about a year before high school, so like seventh grade, beginning of eighth grade, my parents started going to a an Assemblies of God church, um, which is actually where they still go to church. So um, it wasn't quite as like off the walls with the spiritual aspect. Service still sometimes gets interrupted if someone like gets a word from God that they feel like they need to share. Um, but generally speaking, it's a lot more straightforward, kind of traditional. Do a couple songs
Mm-hmm.
and whatever your tithes and offerings and a
Yeah.
shorter-ish sermon, and then kind of wrap it up. So that wasn't that was a little bit more stable, I think, than like these kind of church plants that we'd been attending before, whereas people just felt called by God to like start their own church, because they were concerned about, different things. So there was definitely a lot of like fear based kind of theology in that. There were a lot of, people were very worried about like the Antichrist and like the gay agenda and like why isn't America mentioned in the Book of Revelations and different things like that. So there's definitely a lot of fear based theology that came out of that. In a lot of ways, I think that's probably why I didn't question it so much, was just because I was like, well, this is right. And I had good answers, and I also had like these made up scenarios where these answers were needed.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I had Bible class like every single year, like of school.
Hmm.
So we definitely got like a lot of that, and we did family devotions, every day. And so, yeah, I basically feel like I went to church daily for my entire childhood.
Yeah. Yeah. How how did that? I mean, just in general, how did that like affect you, and especially as you sort of developed? Because I mean, as you develop from being a young child to like a teenager and all those other things, like the way you sort of grapple with religious ideas can change, and a lot of people get that within the context of like youth group. And again, like you mentioned, like being taught apologetics, like, okay, you're getting older now, you're going to need to answer these questions yourself, you're going to need to be able to answer these questions people give you. How did that how did you feel about those sorts of expectations upon you, and just your general sort of general sort of response?
Um, I mean, again, like my environment was so controlled that I didn't realize like how different for most people. Even like Christian families, like I had no
Hmm.
idea. My parents were really specific about like the people that they associated with, and it was, the people that they spent time with were all very similar. Like that is exactly how they raised their kids. Like they were
Hmm.
homeschooling and they were doing family devotions every single day, and like reading through the whole Bible every year, and taking their kids to church multiple times a week. Um, very conservative politically. So really, I never really questioned. I never questioned Christianity, and I never really questioned like conservative politics.
Hmm.
Um, so
Was that a little odd in being in Portland? I mean, it's known as a more liberal place. Did that sort of accentuate that sort of feeling that you're like in the world but not of it, sort of thing? Like, speaking as someone that grew up in a conservative leaning home and was in Indiana where it's red, it's like,
yeah,
so it's.
I think that it was. I mean, I think that growing up in Portland was really good for me.
Hmm.
Um, because it did kind of expose me, I think, earlier to different points of view, different individuals. I think that there was always, well, I mean, probably starting in high school, I think is when it got really the whole stop the gay agenda thing got really popular. When I was in high school, so like late '90s, like early-ish 2000s.
Hmm.
Um, there was a ballot measure in Oregon to constitutionally define marriages between a man and a woman, which is super ridiculous in Oregon because, there's a woman here in Portland who married her house, and there's somebody else who like married their dog, and people like marry themselves now. So this was like, and like this ballot initiative didn't pass, I don't think. I can't remember. It got kicked around a whole bunch, but I think that I think it was good because I was able to like once I finished high school and like started working, I met a lot of really cool people, and it's like, oh yeah, like you're very clearly gay and you're very clearly awesome. Like I am not afraid of you.
Yeah.
So I think that that, I think having Portland culturally was really good for me. And I'm also like a very empathetic person in general. So a lot of, I was getting a lot of stuff, but a lot of it wasn't sticking very well, especially like the kind of anti-LGBT narrative that I was getting was just like, yeah, like if my kid's gay, like I'm not gonna kick him out of the house. Like it's not gonna change how I feel about him. Like why would I feel differently? Like I just like it didn't connect.
Hmm.
I was just like that's weird. Like why would you like it's your child. Like why would you feel differently about them just because they came out of the closet? So little things like that like didn't really stick to me very well because I'm not a very trying to think of how to put this. I'm just like by nature I'm not a fundamentalist. Um,
Yeah.
I'm always looking for like better answers and better solutions and like ways to improve relationships and like ways for people to like get along better. um, while also being like fully honest and fully themselves. And so
Hmm.
for me, I was just like, yeah, if you're trying to get me, I mean, even in high school, it's just like, yeah, if you're trying to get rid of, like, tell me to get rid of my kid, like, I'm out. Like, that's not an option for me. Um, and, I never said that to anyone because it wasn't an issue. I didn't have a child, when I was in high school, but it was just always very apparent to me that it was like, okay, this is dumb. Like, destroy a relationship over this.
Yeah.
So yeah, while I didn't question Christianity and I didn't really question conservative politics, I definitely have always been a very relational person, like relationally driven,
Hmm.
and so um, I think that that kind of saved me from getting too deep in the weeds in that kind of mentality once I was like out of high school slash out of the house.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so I'm sorry if I'm gonna ask this in a clumsy way. Because I know that this is going to be part of our conversation. And I'm just being very honest. I don't know how to like. It's very hard for me to um, ask about basically ask about race without like coming across as a total ass or a dick or like um like it's yeah, I just I'm still trying to formulate that, but I mean that's just like because I acknowledge that I'm a straight white guy, and I like that's just, but that is what it is. So I know that I'm going to be really clumsy about this, but
No,
so I
okay.
apologize.
I can
But
tell you how to do it better.
what's that?
I can tell you how to ask it better
Oh,
next time.
yes. Okay. So maybe you can even tell me right now. But I really, as far as being within these circumstances, and this is just an open question for you, as far as your family life and like your church life and everything, how is that impacted by the fact that your parents are an interracial couple? Was that did that was that an issue for people within your church community? I mean, how did that sort of dynamic play out?
I was really raised in like a air quotes racially colorblind um, way, I guess. By the way that you asked that question was fine.
Okay.
Yeah, so it didn't come up a whole lot. I tried to start conversations about um, race and racism, um, just in within my own family, and they usually just kind of got like shot down. It was like, oh, that's a non-issue.
Hmm.
Um, So it wasn't something that I thought about a whole lot until probably high school when I started realizing, like, a lot of the time, when something was going on at church, was like, oh, I'm the only person here who is not white. Okay. And like, it was a fairly large church, and Portland's an extremely white place, but still, like, if you know, it was, yeah, it was still not uncommon for me to be the only person of color. I mean, other than like one of my siblings, maybe, um,
Mm-hmm.
at an event. So, and honestly, like that didn't bother me until like the comments section of the internet let me know exactly what people were thinking about me
Mm-hmm.
without saying, which means like in the last 5 to 10 years. Like
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
bothered me a whole lot. I didn't feel threatened in those in all white spaces, as a kid because I really had no idea what people were thinking. But now thanks to the internet, I know exactly what people are thinking, and it's kind of horrifying. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um, yeah, but we didn't really have a lot of conversations about race. I met my dad's mom one time, um, and his whole family is still like on the East Coast, and we didn't have any money, so it wasn't like we were going to visit or anything like that. Um, so yeah, I mean, I didn't have my first black friend until I was in college, like college age, um, and I mean, honestly, like that was kind of intentional. It's kind of what like every aspect of my childhood, like it was by design. So,
Mm-hmm. So let's segue into that part. That college age time, what was that like for you?
um, so that was what was that like for me? I'm trying to think. Like, I mean, I still was pretty, um, I still was quite conservative politically. I was still like an evangelical Christian. Um, I really didn't think that that would ever change. I mean, at that age, it was like, yeah, like 19, 20, 21 in there. I was like, you know, I was all in still. Um, it was kind of hard relationally, especially like with family, because it was kind of that was when I realized it was that age, that time of my life, when I realized how important appearances are within like evangelical circles,
Mm-hmm.
especially like within evangelical families. Um, Again, kind of circling back to the whole idea of like if your child is gay, you need to like not communicate with them, things like that, because it's like that so it doesn't glorify God or whatever. But also there's a lot of just like kind of keeping up appearances. There's not a lot of openness or um, there's not a lot of space. They don't hold space for people to be like authentically themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
like like being racially quote unquote racially colorblind and like anti-LGBT, um, and all all these other things. Um, there's this aspect of like we have to, part of our witness is like appearing a certain way, I guess, which like that again like that never sat with me. Like I didn't question Christianity at all. But I was just like, this is ridiculous. Like relationships are more important than like making sure everybody thinks that you're like a godly person. Um, Whatever that happens to look like in your particular faith circle, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I so that was a really difficult season for me, like coming to the realization it was like my my value within like my community and family was in large part directly um, directly correlated with my behavior. Like if
Yeah.
I stayed in line, if I didn't ask questions, then like things were fine. And if I whatever, acted out or made a bad decision, right? Because I made plenty of those, like everyone does. It was like, oh, like you lost points, like your value has diminished. So yeah, and this is like area, like all kinds of stuff. It's like relationships with people who aren't like Christians, premarital sex, like associating with people who are LGBT, just all of those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Were just wow, like you can't do these things and still like have any kind of you don't have any value, right, in our circles.
Right. They're like demerits. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
you get
Exactly. Like a point system.
right.
Um,
Yeah.
So that was extremely hard for me, and so I started seeing a therapist. I think it was like 22 maybe, because it was just like another thing was like I didn't have the skills to sort through all of this, right? So I'm having my entire world kind of like crushed because I was loved and valued by God and my family and my community because I was a person, not because I like behaved the right way in every situation. And like realizing that wasn't true was just like emotionally devastating for me.
Yeah.
I didn't respond to that well, and then I didn't, on top of that, didn't have the skill set to like work through all the ways that I was feeling and like without lashing out, right? So
Right.
did that, therapy was hugely helpful in like giving me like terms, even like, this person is also an evangelical, but just like giving me the terms, like the words to be able to express like how I'm feeling and like my value as a person, like not being dependent on, family and faith circles and like what people think of me, but being like solely dependent on God. Like that was really, I really needed that. Because yeah, like I was definitely flailing for a while. Just not really sure like how to navigate any of that. So yeah, I'm a big fan of counseling if anybody needs it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just gonna that because it's really helpful, especially if communication skills and like naming emotions and things like that aren't something that you were raised with. So
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Therapy is a wonderful tool for all sorts of things.
yes.
Yeah. Were there any in particular like you mentioned in particular like naming things? Was there anything in particular that your therapist was able to help you name and sort of tease out as far as either things you had to communicate to yourself or to others? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You don't have to feel obligated to answer. But if
Oh no, no, it's good. I mean, it's been over 10 years. Like I've definitely had a lot of time to process now. Well, it was 10 years since the first time I went to therapy. I've been to therapy several times since. Yeah. So one of the really powerful things for me was being able to find and name my values, like things that were important to me, and things that couldn't be taken away from me. So that was huge, like being able to sit down and say, okay, these are the things that I value. And I'm going to strive to make my decisions based on my values, right? And they're like my own. They're not given to me by the church or by my parents or by a pastor or, by a peer, since all of my peers are Christians, basically.
Yeah.
But like, these are my values. They're my own, and I can build my own life with my values. So one of the things that, was really helpful was just like that my therapist told me was just like, go and like make a list of like the 5 traits that you think are the most important that like resonate with you as a person. Not like things that you're like, oh, this is amazing, but that's not really me. But the things that really resonate with you, like with your own personality. And so that was huge. And then also like that was like the first time I learned about putting up relational boundaries. Like, I don't like how you're treating me. Doesn't make me feel good. My feelings are valid. I'm not
Yeah.
going to you to treat me like this. And if you do, then you will not be allowed to communicate with me, or whatever the case may be. But just like putting up boundaries and like sticking to them, just as a way to like protect yourself, not because you're like malicious. Um, but I mean, sometimes you do like need to create that space to like take care of yourself, especially you're if you're consistently interacting with people who are not helping you or like building you up or empowering you to become a better person.
Hmm.
That was like a game changer for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's something that's common with a lot of people from evangelical circles is like issues with boundaries. Like, like it's very interesting. Within like the Facebook group, um, there have been conversations around boundaries and like um, feeling sort of unmoored when you leave evangelicalism and people are used to like being so I'm putting up like air quotes but like so close, like because a lot of times people are just in your business, but like
Yeah.
but other times there are also very genuine, very deep relationships. It's both and it's not either or. But yeah, boundaries, yeah, that seems to be like a very important thing for people to learn that have been may have been brought up in evangelicalism and have trouble with that. Like, I'm not sure what it is. I'm not sure if it's like a combination of the church culture plus like this idea that God knows everything, like, and like is watching you all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's no framework for like consent within evangelical thought.
Right. Yeah.
'Cause
Yeah.
we don't really, yeah, it's like God's kind of the one calling all of the shots, and you don't get a say. It doesn't matter if you like it or not, and God doesn't care if you like it or not. Like, you're going to do it. And so that's kind of like that kind of filters into like people's parenting of like, I don't care if you like it or not, you're going to do it, and if you don't, you're going to be sorry. And it
Mm.
filters into like the way people pastor, which is horrifying. I mean, like, yeah, there's so much there that like needs to be unpacked. But yeah, I definitely think that like boundaries are a good thing, and like teaching people to respect other human beings, not
Right.
because of their behavior, but because they are human beings. Like, again,
Yeah.
it's like hugely important.
Yeah, absolutely. So within this, during this time, this like college age time, are you at like a Christian college, or are you like at college and working? What's your circumstance where you're like, where you're getting exposure to all these different experiences, different people that expanded your horizons as far as the type of people and lives that can be lived, because you had a very tight knit sort of insular experience up until college. Um, what what was that wider experience like for you? Yeah, we talked a little bit about you talked a lot about your sort of internal experience and all the things you were processing within evangelicalism, but and everything. What were some of the catalysts for that?
Yeah. So let's see. So my parents really, wanted me to go to a Christian college. And so I went to a Christian school for like, I don't know, like one semester, I think. And just like, I don't know what I want to do, and this is really expensive, and my parents can't afford it. So maybe I'll like take some classes at the community college. Um, so I mean that was good. Like, I ended up taking a political science class, and so I was exposed to something other than like, conservative thinking. I remember I went back home and told my mom about how, it was like, we need to have universal health care. Like,
Relevant.
so, proceeded to tell me this horror story about how my dad had like this horrific dentist appointment when he was living in Europe, and it was because the doctors were all socialists and they don't care about people, and so they made your dad suffer. So that I didn't really think about that a whole lot afterwards. So I was like, oh, well, I guess that doesn't work because socialists are evil and they're trying to murder people. Um, so yeah, but like having classes with different people from different backgrounds. We're a lot more Portland, a lot more liberal.
Yeah.
It's very white liberal, but it's still very liberal. And then, yeah, also working. So didn't really stick with the whole college thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and ended up getting a job. Um, and yeah, so I
Mm-hmm.
think that like something, yeah, so didn't really stick with college. Ended up getting a job, and then met someone, and this did not make my parents very happy because he was not the right kind of Christian. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think I was 22 at the time, and my parents um, decided to ground me. Um, and so I was not allowed to leave the house except to go to work at church.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yeah, this is not cool. So so I ended up, I think I was 22. I can't remember exactly, but I think I was 22. But so I ended up moving in with my boyfriend, and my parents were extremely displeased about this. And so I ended up getting, probably every like 2 months, 3 months, I would end up getting like either an email or a letter or a phone call talking about how I was living in sin and like I needed to repent, I needed to move home and like be under authority. And,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like the classic evangelical lines um, that that are used for people on people to kind of control their behavior. And thankfully it was for the most part, it was an extremely positive and like affirming relationship. Affirming of me as like a human being. Um, so that I think like that was really huge for me to like live with someone who kind of like loved me unconditionally.
Mm-hmm.
Not like it wasn't perfect. Again, like I'm not trying to say that like sugarcoat anything, but like it really was like a positive experience in my life,
Mm-hmm.
even though I was like quote unquote living in sin. Um, so yeah, that was kind of interesting. And then after that, I decided like, okay, I think that after that relationship ended, I was like, I probably need to like go back to like evangelicalism, and like kind of conservative thinking. So yeah, after that relationship was over, I kind of moved back into like the more traditional kind of churchy, church several times a week, and um, no sex, obviously, because God can't handle sex. And yeah, so like just being friends with everyone and spending time with all these like really, really privileged people at my church. So it was kind of wild. Like that was its own little experience, but yeah, that
Yeah.
was my exposure to like other like ways of existing in the world without being smitten by God. So
That's a really good way to put it.
Oh, check, check,
I
check.
like that a lot.
Check, check. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Check, 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 check.
Um. So what? How long is this? How long is this period up until? Um. I definitely want to talk about your experience with and how. Um. I've gotten to know you through Twitter, and you talk a lot about race in the church, and you talk a lot about what that is really what was this driving force um, between your sort of leaving evangelicalism permanently and examining how deeply racism goes into Christianity, white Christianity, um, lead us up into that point for you. If there's if there's a way to summarize that, or if we just need to launch right into it. However you really sort of want to approach that. But and I know, so just to contextualize, just to contextualize a little bit. I mean, we've talked about that. We've been messaging for a while, but now it's the date we're recording is August 19th. It's a week after Charlottesville, Virginia. People will know what that means when they listen to this. I think they're going to know what that means for a very long time. So that's present in both of our minds as we have this conversation. But yeah, I'm just going to hand it over to you now with that little bit of context about like what's going on right now. So.
Right. So I decided, I wanted to like jump like headfirst back into kind of evangelical world and, do things the right way. And, so within a couple of years, I wound up at Mars Hill Church up in Seattle. And it felt for me at the time, like it felt really kind of like comforting to be in like a theological context where there were like these kind of hard and fast rules, like stuff didn't change. You couldn't pull Bible verses from random places and like throw them together and make yourself a Bible salad or something. I don't know what I'm talking about right now. Just you couldn't just cherry pick verses. Like they were a lot more into like the whole systematic theology, even though it was like systematic, like white male theology.
Yeah.
Organized in a way that I had not been exposed to prior to that. So spent several years at Mars Hill, and it was kind of when Mars Hill was starting to implode that I kind of was like, oh wow, like people, it was, because the timing was exactly the same as like Mars Hill, like really starting to go under, and Michael Brown being murdered were basically like the same week. And so, people like everybody in like the reform circle was basically like online every single day. And then people who were kind of outside of like the reform Calvinist, like Acts 29 group, like they were all online every day too, because they were like, oh, like what the hell is happening over there? Like, and so it's like, there's all this gossip kind of flying around and like all these rumors. And then suddenly like Ferguson, Missouri is on fire. And so everybody who's like trying to figure out like what the heck is going on with Mark Driscoll context, all of a sudden they're like, oh wow, like Black people are being horrid, like they always are. It wasn't exactly like that, but that was kind of, that was really like how it felt. And I remember kind of like getting online that night and just like seeing the like most like dehumanizing, vitriolic conversations about, Ferguson specifically and Black Americans in general, and people kind of reinforcing this idea that like the police are always right even if they make the wrong decision kind of thing. And, obviously like Michael Brown was a thug who didn't deserve to live, and because there's no way to redeem an 18-year-old, like they're lost. There was no grace. There was no empathy. Like people, like I shouldn't say all, most people said nothing. Like I knew that people were seeing this because it was like everything that everyone was posting, but like most like white Christian people in my circle didn't say anything about it. And then some people said some people shared like articles by Black pastors who were also condemning Mike Brown and saying that, the wages of sin is death. And it's like, well, he's like stole a pack of cigarettes, maybe, we think. And like, that's really, you're gonna like start shooting people for petty theft? Like, really? Okay. Like, and so all of a sudden there was like this huge break, right? Between like what people said, like we love our neighbors and like, doesn't matter like how people behave, like God loves people anyway, and we just want what's best for people, and like God wants what's best for people, and that's why he gives us these commands, and that's why we live the way we live. And it was like all of a sudden like people's closets flew open, right? And like instead of skeletons, it's a bunch of sheets, like and I was just floored. Like I could not believe how, like, I don't even like really using the word racist because nobody in this country is a racist, amazingly. We're really lucky. But yeah, it's just like mind blowing to me that it's like these people who are like, oh yeah, like we love God and we love our neighbors. It's like, oh, unless you're Black, and a police officer accuses you of doing something really stupid, like in that case, like you deserve whatever you get, like up to and including being executed in the middle of the street. I don't know. It's still, I'm not very good at articulating like exactly, what that experience was like. But it was I feel like it was kind of like the second time the church really, or like evangelicalism specifically, really like let me down hard. Like I really sincerely believed that like I was loved. And it was like that night I was like, oh wow, like you people do not give a shit about me. Like if I was shot by a police officer, like you'd be shitting on my grave. Like you were, I don't know what the rules are exactly as far as like who gets justice and who doesn't, but it's pretty clear that like if you're not white, like you are irrelevant. Like your life, your experiences, like they're just invalid, So it was like, and so I think that shed a lot of light on like just like the fact that like evangelical Christianity in the U.S. is not like it's never dealt with its own racism. It's just kind of like swept it under the rug. And I mean, it's just, to me, it's still kind of mind blowing. Like I don't even have the ability to articulate effectively like what I felt and what I saw, and how shocking it is to realize that people who call themselves Christians, like call themselves like believers and Jesus followers, like, if every Black person in this country was gone tomorrow, like they're like, okay, we're just, we're done with you, like mass executions, they'd be like, whatever, it's like, oh, okay, well, glad to know like where I stand, right? So I think that like, that was just like incredibly hard, incredibly difficult for me to process. And I think part of the reason why I'm just like, I can't, like, I can't keep doing this. Like, this is not okay. And you people are like morally revolting because there's no consistency between like what you say and what you do. And so that was the point when I kind of started like digging into this aspect of like my life and my experiences, and like not shying away from them, because in white evangelical spaces, like there's not room for conversations about race or racism. And if you experience racism, like you have to have a white person vouch for your experience, otherwise it didn't happen, or you misinterpreted it, or like you're exaggerating et cetera, et cetera. And so this was kind of the point where I was like, okay, well, I'm like done holding people's hands and like protecting people's feelings, because it doesn't matter. It's not going to get me anywhere. Like if like you're not allowing, because my experiences don't line up with your worldview, you just automatically negate them. Like you're not even willing to have a conversation. So I'm just going to take that as an invitation to be like completely like brutally honest and not like try to like protect anyone's little feelers or like kind of skirt around these conversations. Like I'm just gonna go for it, because there's not anything I can say or do to like get people to like listen to me or believe me, except to be like brutally honest. And you know, I mean, it still is the case that like I get, you know, a ton of pushback from like white evangelical Christians who say that I'm the one that's actually hateful, and you know, I need to support the police and whatever, because that's what it says in Romans, right? Romans 13, support the police no matter what. So that was kind of like the turning point for me, and the point where I kind of was like, I'm sorry. It's like, dear white people, I'm sorry, but I no longer give a shit about your feelings. Like, and I don't mean that like literally like across the board, like I don't care. Like I do care about people who have invested in me, and I try to be respectful of them. But like on the whole, like you don't get to come and police my experiences. Like you don't get to come and tell me like what I can and can't say, and like what has and hasn't happened to me. And I think that like as a woman, like this happens to you anyway, right? Like your experiences are kind of policed, and your body is policed, and you're told like what you can and can't do, and what did and didn't happen, what did and did not happen to you. But I think like as a woman of color, especially as a Black woman, because like I mean, other than like trans Black women, like we're at the very bottom of the hierarchy, the racial gender hierarchy in society. And so, it's like, yeah, everybody expects you to do like their emotional labor, and everybody expects you to like educate them like one-on-one on every single thing, even though like it doesn't work. It's like every single time you fail the test, like why am I still teaching you? So yeah, I think that I kind of got to the point where I was like, okay, well, if that's how it's going to be, like, you can keep living in your bubble, and I'm just going to keep, you know, shouting, I guess. Like, you know, it's this whole idea of, like, being a voice in the wilderness. And I think that also I think there's also kind of this aspect of, like, the whole racist trope about, like, Black women being angry, right? Because that scares people. Black anger in general scares white America, I think, because potentially they're worried that like we're angry about something legitimate and might act on our anger. Which I'm like, what do you like? Again, it's like, what do you think is going to happen? Like, just think this through. Like, you think that like Black people are going to enslave you? Like, really? Like, there's no way. Like, we're not trying to like get back at you, or like, you know, it's not an eye for an eye. But people really, I don't know why, but people really, really struggle with this. But I think again, in terms of like evangelical spaces, and like there's not a framework to be able to like have these conversations, right, about like power disparities. It's just like, oh no, like everyone's equal. It's like, but you don't even give everyone an equal voice. Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, but everyone's equal because we said so. And it's like, okay, so are you going to let like a Black woman preach? It's like, well, no, because God said we couldn't do that. So like this, again, like with consent, with race and like power disparities and power dynamics, like there's no framework within evangelicalism to have these kinds of conversations. So I think that at least for people in my situation, like I think that's part of why it's like so it's just so damn exhausting.
Hmm.
Is you have to educate people on like power disparities, right? And like I mean, you're having conversations with people where like everybody's equal, and it's like, okay, so how come, I mean, just like as an example, like how come 85% of CEOs in America are like white men if everyone's equal? And then you kind of go down this rabbit trail of like, well, they're just better suited to yada yada yada, and it doesn't, it doesn't go anywhere. So you have to like start at the very you have to start at like the very bottom, and it's like with every single conversation, which is kind of why I tried to like start putting my thoughts into a uh, more cohesive place on my blog, because it's just like I keep having to have these same conversations over and over and over and over and over. And like, sometimes it really is worth it. Like sometimes there's payoff there, but it's like, it's a lot of work for like one person to show up 18 months later. Like I decided that it's really important to like listen to Black voices. Like, oh my gosh. Thank you. I'm so glad that you decided this. It's like, do you know like how much work, like literal work and emotional work, like that I've had to like get to this point, and it's like one person, really? Okay. So, yeah. I'm still here though, so if you want to ask questions, I'm sure I'll feel better tomorrow and be willing to answer them. Not like writing people off. I still think that it's like necessary work, but also like trying to encourage people to like educate themselves instead of asking someone to like hold their hand like the whole while they walk from like white patriarchy to like I don't know, where am I right now? I'm not even sure where I am, like spiritually, politically, philosophically, theologically. Like I don't even really know, but like anything that's moving away from like white patriarchy is probably a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And,
so.
Yeah. And speaking of someone that embodies a lot of that, just yes, it's good to move away from that. And absolutely, unequivocally, yes.
You.
Yes. It's yeah.
Girl, this is crazy. Me too.
I do want to say, I mean, just as far as what you were mentioning there, just at the very end, you are very willing to have conversations with people on Twitter, and they are honest, and they are just like, okay, go educate yourself. And I think that's like, the word that like comes to mind, I wanted, just because it's a phrase, it's like, I think that's fair. Like but it's not even, it's like fair isn't even in the ballpark. Like it's like, it should be expected that people should not have to ask those that are subject to white patriarchy and being victims of it to explain why they're a victim. But I mean, I know that it happens, and I know that it's just kind of the way that online discourse happens, where it's like, well, what about this and what about that, and like people just don't, they think they're just having a conversation, which they are, but they're also like putting all this onus upon the person they're asking the question to, instead of just opening up a new tab and Googling it themselves like a freaking grown up. Like. Yeah. So I mean, I like just to that very last point. I mean, you are very in watching you converse with people, you are very I see it as successful. I know that you're a much better barometer of success there as far as because you're the one discussing it with them, but yeah, and not that you even need my feedback because you don't, but I just wanted I just wanted to affirm you in that I see your intent played out. So
Thank you. I appreciate that. Because yeah, it's like sometimes I do kind of feel like I'm just like screaming at a wall.
mm-hmm.
So
Which is basically the best description of Twitter ever.
yeah,
Just,
I know. I know. Oh my gosh.
just screaming
yeah,
into the
so-
darkness.
Yep, exactly. It's nice to it's nice to get some like outside feedback, honestly, because
Yeah.
sometimes like it's really hard to see. It's like, am I making any kind of a difference here, really? Because it doesn't feel that way sometimes.
Mm. Yeah. You mentioned your blog, and I do want to talk about. Are you all right talking about your most recent piece? I mean, it's a very, it's you published it earlier this month in August, and it's called "The Day I Learned White Christians Hate Me," and you mentioned in the end of the blog post that people should sit and later in the not at the very close to the end you say like sit in the discomfort. I'm because this is a podcast and you may not have read it. I'm going to tell you at the beginning of this, sit in the discomfort. People like me that need to hear what you have to say. So you wrote at length about how Ferguson in particular was this beginning point to understanding that your perspective wasn't valued. Is it okay if I quote a couple pieces of it? Is that all right?
Of course, totally.
Okay. Okay. You write it in really in as a letter directly to white evangelical Christians. And I'm gonna. You say, "Dear white evangelical Christians, I sincerely believed you loved me because God loved me. Now I know for a fact that you do not. I know that night, referring to the night Michael Brown was killed, that white Christians do not love me. You claim you do, but I'm a black woman in America. I'm not stupid. I hear what you say. I see what you write. I observe how you behave." I'm going to skip a little the remainder of that paragraph and go to a couple other parts. How do you hate me? Let me count the ways. I know you hate me when you jump to defend cops. I know you hate me when you jump to defend roadside executions. I know you hate me when you say he probably deserved it. I know you hate me when you call me a liar because my experiences are different than your own. And it continues. I am going to link to it in the blog. I'm sorry, in the show notes, and I highly recommend everyone listen to it, read it, and read it all the way through. This is really, I mean, such a painfully honest condemnation of, really of so much, and I don't really know how to frame the next question for you other than just to hear you talk about. I mean, you mentioned that actually this is the culmination of the last 3 years of your experience. This is you trying to cope, trying to tell people and have them listen. So I just want to. I don't necessarily want to frame it in any other way than just to have you sort of talk about this piece and really where you what you're feeling right now, especially given freaking Nazis walking the street and without hoods. I mean, I know that we've all become accustomed to like just freaking batshit crazy stuff every day, but this past week has been a real nightmare. So I'm sorry I'm being a really shitty interviewer, but um, I I don't even uh like I said earlier, I'm not sure how to frame the question because I just and I'm not trying to make you do your own labor or anything like that. It's more just like um I just want to and I just want to sort of get out of the way and just hear what you have to just really publish what you have to say. Like so what um
Yeah.
what led you to write this piece earlier in the month, and how I mean this has been a terrible week, but I mean we've seen I could have talked I was thinking about this earlier, uh leading up to this conversation today. It's like I could have probably prefaced and said this has been a terrible week almost any week this year. You know, I could have said that
Yeah.
at any number of occasions, but you know, it seems like this whole year has been that hold my beer meme like every single year. You thought last week was bad? Hold my beer. Like, um,
Yep.
and um, so yeah, I was just thinking about that, and like I could have framed it in the same way really at any point because it's only gotten worse. So I'm gonna shut up now, and just turn it over to you, and just just the question I mentioned earlier as far as um, what led you to write this piece, and as far as this whole past week, where are you now?
Okay. Yeah, so people kind of been asking me on Twitter mostly, but in real life too, um, to kind of to write this like this blog post that I ended up putting up. And it really did take me the last 3 years to like process. And as I mentioned earlier, like I still don't even feel like I have like the language or the framework necessary to begin to unpack like just how horrific it was when how horrific the response of like the white Christian evangelical church was after Michael Brown is killed. Like I don't have the language. Like literally don't even know how to put it into words. Like how just horrifying that experience was. And yeah, man, this week is just it's been wild. I mean, my younger brother, he's 2 years younger than me. He lived in Virginia when he was in the Coast Guard, and then for college. And so he told us about these Klan rallies that they would have. The police would show up to protect these people from the people in his neighborhood, and his neighborhood was largely black. And so, the police would show up to make sure that the people in the Klan didn't get hurt as they would march like down his street. So this is like Virginia Beach area. And so I think that, yeah, it's like when all of this started happening, I mean, so let's see. I think it was Friday night when they did their like pathetic little tiki torch march and were screaming like racial slurs and whatever, and like trying to like burn down a black church or whatever it was that they were trying to do. It's just like, yeah, again, as people keep saying, it's like, what year is it? Like you could literally just like shuffle all the numbers around. It wouldn't really matter. It's like, this is America. And we kind of have to own that, or this is just going to keep happening. Like 1957, like they're still going to be having these conversations. Like, this isn't our country. It's like, hell yes, it is. Like, this is exactly how it was designed, and you didn't change any of the original design. Like, I mean, America was founded as a white supremacist nation. I know that that's ugly, and like, I know white evangelicals really bristle at that, but like, it was in the Constitution. Like, it wasn't like they were hiding it, you know. Like, they literally like wrote it down. You're probably carrying it in your pocket or on your phone. And so I think that, like, yeah, when people, like, I remember when everybody was like up in arms about Obama's pastor Jeremiah Wright saying "God damn America." And, it's just like, well, I don't know if you like do you really want to like compare? Like, I feel like there's a lot of this. Like, do you really want to switch sides and see what it's like, and then come back and tell me how you feel? That's kind of a comment I use actually on Twitter a lot. Is like, okay, you go be enslaved for 400 years, and then come back and we'll talk about like pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. Yeah, so I think that it's like, I think that we really have to own this. Like, we really have to like be able to have these hard conversations. And I know that it's ugly, and I know it's painful, and I know it hurts, and I know it should have happened like 200 years ago. Like, I mean, but we keep like kicking the can down the road, and like, it's just getting worse and worse. So yeah, I think that like a big part of the reason that I wrote this blog post was because it's like we have to be able to have these kinds of conversations. We have to be able to talk about like power dynamics, and we have to be able to talk about racial disparities in policing, and not even just like policing and criminal justice, but like the way that like cities fund like infrastructure and the like city planning, and like the way that they fund schools. And like, I mean, one of the things that like stuck out to me from Ferguson was a comment that I saw, everywhere from like every white person in the country, of like, why are they burning down their own town? And it was like, well, I mean, I guess most people don't know this, but like the black neighborhoods in towns, like, they didn't pave the streets. Like, they didn't get utilities. Like, the homes didn't have running water. Like, you certainly weren't going to call the police if something happened, because you were going to get beat up and they weren't ever going to solve the crime. Like, and so it's like cities intentionally like created ghettos. Like, they didn't provide services, which kept property values down. And people couldn't accumulate wealth. And so it's like, we have to be able, again, it's like, I keep kind of coming back to this. We have to be able to have these hard conversations about like the way that like our parents and grandparents and great grandparents behaved, because it was horrific, and they don't get passes, right? Mm-hmm. Because they have to fix their mess. Like, they thought that they could just pretend like, oh, everything's fine now, whatever, slavery's over, Jim Crow, segregation, that's over, like, everything is fine. And it's like, no, like, we have to fix this, or we're just going to keep coming back to this, like, same, the same, like, ugly spot. It's like, you can turn around, but you can't get out, right? And so, it's like, you can choose not to look at it, but you can't get out of it. And so, yeah, I think that was a big part of, like, my motivation in writing this blog post, is because I really, like, I know a lot of people can't handle it, but I really do want to have, more conversations with people on the topic, especially of like race and the church, because the church has, like, yeah, just the fact that the church didn't go into these black neighborhoods and like fix the infrastructure, like install utilities and like fix like sorry, I shouldn't be laughing at this, but look, the fact that they didn't go in and like fix these schools and like fund these projects when they totally could have, I mean, there's like, I don't know, 20 or 30 million Americans go to church every single week, like every single week. And so it's like, we could have taken care of this stuff a long time ago, but you don't want to because you don't value Black lives. Like, that's the only conclusion I can come to at this point, right? It's like, again, it's been like 150 years. Like, I have to come to the conclusion that, like, you just don't give a damn about people that aren't white or weren't born with bootstraps or however you want to put it. Like, I don't know, I can't conclude anything else. Like, if you're really okay with like suffering, or it's just, yeah. There's just so much to unpack there with like the way that the church in America has behaved, the way that like the government has behaved, not just like the federal government, but like local governments especially, and just like their and states in their just like blatantly anti-Black legislation and city ordinances. And yeah, it's like at some point, like somebody's gonna have to like grow the fuck up and like start this conversation, because it's not like, I know that white people, by and large, not everyone, but like most white people, feel very uncomfortable talking about race. And it's like, I'm sorry, like, I know that it sucks. It's not a fun conversation to have, but, if you don't want to keep coming back to this same point over and over again, it's like, we're doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Like, it's not going to happen, So if you want stuff to get better, we have to, like, be willing to have these hard conversations. And I think that, I mean, another thing that I think that's important to recognize is that, like, these hard conversations aren't going to be led by white people. Like, white people need to listen more than speak. Because, like, the rest of us have had to listen to you, like, forever. So we're going to know what you think. I know that
that's
like,
very true.
People left, like, funny, they weren't funny, they were, like, meant to be, like, mean or whatever, but the people left funny comments on my blog about, like, you don't know what I think. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I haven't had enough experience with, like, conservative white evangelicals to have a good idea of, like, what you think. Like, you're not that original. Like, you're probably not original at all. But yeah, so I know it's like, it's hard. I get that. Like, I respect that. And I'm not, like, trying to come after anyone, but it's like, we can do it, or, like, we can just pretend everything's fine the way that our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents did, and, like, then our kids are going to have to deal with it, and then our grandkids are going to have to deal with it. And it's like, I don't know. I'd rather just own it and get it over with, because, yeah, like, it's ugly. It's like surgery, right? Like, surgery's really ugly. Yeah. And it looks way worse before it gets better. So, but yeah, I mean, that's just the reality of it. Like, we gotta be willing to, like, do the surgery.
Right. Yeah.
Because, yeah, the way that, like, the system was designed, it only works for certain people. So, yeah.
Yeah. And so, in light of that, what I want to ask you and get your insight on is, so given the sort of dynamics that you just explained, as far as, like, there's generational dynamics, there's, like, some people from older generations, whether they feel like, we addressed this, like the Civil Rights Act, like that was good, that was done. Then there are people closer to our age that's just by the very nature of the fact that the population has sort of diversified in a lot of ways. Like, there's just a lot more there's people are in mixed race couples a lot more. There are a lot more children that are biracial or multiracial. Like there's all these different factors that add into this. But so like even amongst like the white evangelical Christians, let's just for a second, like I guess we could talk just about like religious people, like white evangelical people that you address in your blog, and the sort of people that hold a hell of a lot of political power in this country. They there might be a diversity of opinion within them. There may be some people that think it's not an issue. There may be some people that feel like things are like basically racial tolerance is table stakes. And then so you've got this like wide range. How and like given your point that white people just need to shut the fuck up and like just listen for a very, very long time. How do you sort of see the conversation happening? 'Cause I feel like, for some people, they feel like the conversation doesn't even need to happen. And you like have to you don't even get to have the conversation you want to have until you can convince them to have the conversation you want to have. Like, and so, because I don't want to like, again, I'm not trying to frame it like I'm trying to put, like the labor on you. Just because of this, you want to have this conversation, and I don't want to dictate it. Like I'd rather hear how you think it would be the most productive, because, you know, white people have had the power and they could have begun this conversation a long time ago and they didn't, you know? So how do we start to have these conversations?
I mean, where do I start? So yeah, I think that it's trying to think of like context here, right? Because I think that the first and most important thing is to not have expectations that like someone is going to educate you, for free. Yeah. Like we've done that. We're kind of tired of that. So, yeah, I mean, I do think that it's good to kind of, start by just like exposing yourself to, you know, more diverse voices, in contexts where like, I mean, I think that like conferences and books and podcasts, like those are all like really, really great ways to go. With that, Twitter is incredible. I mean, takes absolutely nothing. And like everyone on there is always joking, like, I can't believe this website is free. But
that's true.
Like Twitter is like an amazing way to diversify the voices that you are hearing from. And I do try to remind people, at least on my Twitter feed, of like, if you're being educated by someone like on this platform, like go give them $5, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and I try to do that too. Like people that I learn from, like I hop on like my Cash App or Venmo and like try to send them like $5 or $10 just because it's like, I'm learning things, you know, every single day. But yeah, I would say that that's like a really good way to start. But I'd also have to say like, so yeah, be intentional about getting into spaces that have more diverse voices. And like, honestly, like your church probably is not going to be that space. and I don't mean this, and I don't mean to be mean about it, but just like to be blunt and to the point. Like if your church is not a diverse space, it's not going to be a diverse space because you as a white person go up to the pastor and are like, hey, we need more black people in here. Like it's like, just go somewhere else, like save energy and go somewhere else. And like, I mean, this is kind of where I'm struggling right now too, even is like, I would love to find a progressive, affirming church in Portland that's not like all white leadership, all white congregations. I haven't found one yet because Portland is like all white. I mean, I say that jokingly, but it's like the whitest major city in the country. Like literally. And, so yeah, I mean, I would definitely say like you have to be intentional about getting into those spaces. And I do think churches are a really easy kind of way to go. I think that's a really great place to start. But again, like not everybody lives in a diverse city. Like,
right. Yeah.
I'm one of those people that does not. So yeah, I think that's a really good way to go. I think also, I mean, again, like don't ask people for free labor, but if you can create spaces where you can like, you know, if you have a book club or something, maybe pay someone to like come and talk, like read someone's book that is local and then like pay them to whatever their fee is, like come and talk to your book club. Like, I mean, there's lots of different ways to go about it. And I'm not trying to put work on like other black people or like, again, on myself or like, yeah, like we're just here and available for whatever you need. Like I mean, we have lives and bills that we have to pay too.
Right.
But I would say that like, yeah, first, like go to a church that has like, the congregation is diverse and the leadership is diverse, because you're not usually going to find one without the other. And then, yeah, like I would say create spaces or go to other spaces like, you know, podcasts and blogs and conferences and things like that, where you're, and Twitter, where you're kind of like hearing other points of view that are not, that aren't your own. And then I would also say, like, and I like had so many people in the last week, you know, since all of this stuff happened in Charlottesville, had so many people talking about like, you know, I can't, there's no point in talking to my family. Like there's no point, like it's not going to do any good. It's like, it's your job. Like, you know, unless they're abusing you, which, I mean, again, boundaries, like sometimes you do have to put up those healthy boundaries. Like that's your responsibility. Like there's no way in hell your parents are going to listen to me. Like they're not. It wouldn't matter like if I showed up on their front porch. It wouldn't matter if I like wrote them a letter. It wouldn't matter if I wrote a book and you gave it to them. Like they're not going to listen to me. Right. So you have to be the one to convey what like black and brown voices are saying to your parents in the way that you think they're going to be most willing to hear it. Like parents, family, whatever, aunts, uncles, you know, your next door neighbor who's a cop, whoever. Like a lot of those people are just not going to listen to someone who doesn't look like them. And that's really what it comes down to. So a lot of this work really is like white folk work.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But again, if you can pay people of color to educate you, that's like a great place to start. But then you have to go and have those conversations with like friends, family, coworker, people who you know will not listen to someone like myself. So yeah, I would say those are kind of like the three bigger steps that I would suggest people take.
Yeah, that's very good. That's all. Yeah. And there is a lot, I mean, again, like understatement of the millennium. There's a lot of white folk work to do. like, yeah.
Yeah.
It's, there's a lot for us to do, but, I mean, the the other thing is that like people like you that are doing this work that like that are honestly speaking truth to power, that are addressing these things, and like we all need to hear you. Like we all need to hear your voice. Like, and we all need to validate your experience. And that's just the end of the end. Like, you know, like we need yeah. We just had white supremacists walking around without hoods.
Yeah.
I mean, time to saddle up and
Yep.
and and get to work. Like,
Yeah.
there's no, yeah. That's just, yeah. And all those things are good. And again, like we have to hear people like you. And I mean, for my part, like I'm so glad that you are even willing to come onto the show and talk to me in this space, like, and that you're willing to share these things that you're working on, and these things that you've poured so much of yourself into, and like that you are working so selflessly to do for the betterment of everybody. Like, you know, you deserve all the credit in the world for doing that. And so yeah, I definitely encourage everyone to read and be challenged by the things that what you've written in this blog post. Again, I'll link it in the show notes, and I'm going to I'll link it in the show notes there, and so that everyone reads it, because it's required reading. Like, and read to the end, read it all, and be uncomfortable, because we've made people that look like me have made other people uncomfortable for hundreds of years. So you can be uncomfortable reading something for 4 minutes. Like, again, understatement of the millennium. I know. So yeah. You've had such a interesting, harrowing path. Like, you mentioned you're not sure where you are now. You haven't found the sort of home as far as like an affirming church, that sort of thing. Where, like, how do you feel now? Where are you now as far as all this like tumult, that we have nationally and locally, and everything. I mean, everything is just that gif of Donald Glover walking into the room on fire, like, from Community. Like,
Yeah.
like that's
Oh yeah.
like,
Yeah.
to make a Twitter reference, like, that's 2017. Like, that's just every like, you step away from Twitter for like 5 minutes, and like,
Then we're gonna go to war with North Korea. When you stop.
yeah.
God,
Yeah.
this is not
So-
what I needed.
Right. So I mean, this is life now, apparently.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about what we have ahead?
About what we have ahead. I mean, I don't mean to be cliche. I really do think like people of color, especially like Black and Native people, have like way more hope for the future of this country than white people right now. And I know that sounds really kind of funny, but it's like, I mean, the U.S. has had worse presidents than Donald Trump. Like the U.S. had like presidents that were way more racist than Donald Trump ever could have dream of being. Like,
He's on our money.
it's on our money. Yeah, receipts. Um, yeah, I mean, I think to me, I'm like, if a couple, like, if we can get like, if we can get a small group of committed people, like, we can do this. I know that sounds super, super fucking corny, and I'm so sorry, but like, I really do believe that. I don't think that, like, you know, like, all these like white supremacists and whatever, they're like, yeah, like, people are gonna die, like, that's just gonna be like what happens because we gotta like restore the natural order, or like God knows whatever they call themselves now. But yeah, like, it doesn't. I don't think that that's like how it has to be. Like, we don't have to just like roll over and let them win.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, like, history is on our side, right? Like, all of the data that's coming out, like, it's all on our side. And yeah, I think that the moral arc of the universe is on our side. That doesn't, I mean, there's still work to do, you know, and like, I'm not planning on quitting at any time. You know, I think that I personally, like, I'd rather do the hard stuff now so that my kids don't have to do it. You know, and I don't want to like try to give anyone leeway as far as like not talking about race or racism or racial issues or like racial disparities with your kids, because that is that's part of why we're in this mess right now, is because our parents didn't have those kinds of conversations with us. So, I mean, you know, I was raised in white spaces, so, but I didn't have those conversations either. I know that like Black and brown parents were definitely having, some of them are definitely having those conversations on the regular. But yeah, I mean, I know that it looks ugly, and I know that it's really hard to maintain your own sanity right now. But like, I don't know. I mean, like, I can't speak for like anyone but myself, but from what I've read in the history books, like, America's gone through a lot worse. Like, Black people have gone through a hell of a lot worse, and like, we're still here, still kicking. So, I mean, I think that, like, I really do think we can do this. Like, we can have these hard conversations, and we can like change the way that we have been doing things. And, like, again, it's hard work, but I'd rather do it so that my kids don't have to. Like, I don't want my kids to have to be like showing up and protesting fucking Nazis when they're in their 30s. You know, like, I don't want them watching like their friend getting hit by like a terrorist, like driving a car at 50 miles an hour down a crowded street. Like, I don't want that, you know. And I also don't want my kids to be part of like the alt-right. Like, that's kind of, I'm in a weird spot. I'm like, never heard of this before, but like, I'm Black, but my kids, I think, pass as white. And so I don't really know how, I mean, they're little right now, but I don't know how they're going to identify when they're older. But I mean, I like, like, I don't want them like on either side of this. Like, I don't want them having to do like this work, and I don't want them winding up like advocating for white supremacy, because like, God knows, like, crazier things have happened. So yeah, I mean, I know that it's hard, and I know that it's ugly, and I know that it's a lot of work. Like, resisting is a lot of work, but we don't, it's like us or our kids or our grandkids. I mean, that's really, you know, so at some point somebody's got to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. I think that's a lot of like what it comes down to. Is at some point, like, somebody's got to stand up and say, like, this whole thing, like, was designed intentionally so that white people could succeed and everybody else would stay put, essentially. And so, I do think that, yeah, I mean, like I said, it's a lot of work. There's a lot of work to be done. Like, you don't get breaks or days off from white supremacy. Like, ask me how I know. Like, there's always like something to do to fight, and like, so not everybody can do everything, but you can, whatever you can do, like whatever margin you do have in your life. Like, I think that that is, yeah, like that's what we need to be doing. And I mean, I think that, like, yeah, we need to get organized, and it's up to us. Otherwise, we're doing the same damn thing that our parents and grandparents did. We're just telling our kids, like, fuck it, you do it, I don't care. So, this reminds me of in Lord of the Rings, and Frodo is talking about how, like, I wish the ring had never come to me, and get response of, like, that's kind of how everyone feels. Like, well, what did Gandalf say? He's like, so do all who live to see such times.
Yeah.
But that is for them to decide. All you have to decide is what to do with the time that is given you.
Yeah.
Just like, yep. So it's like, we can do it, or we can be irresponsible and negligent and abusive, and yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So make the most of your time. Yeah.
Yep. I mean, take care of yourself too.
Right.
Not don't burn out, please. But, like, yeah.
Yeah.
Very important.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we've, I'm feeling like this more and more, lately, that even like 2-hour conversations like barely scratches the surface of people's stories. Like,
Yep.
So, but I just feel, there's so much more to say. There's so much more, to hear. Not for me to say, like, but for me to hear from you, and to hear your, but I know that it's already been quite a while here. So, I just want to thank you so much for what you've shared, and for agreeing to be on the show. I really appreciate it. Where can people find you online? Where can they continue to support you in whatever way you might need?
Oh, yeah. So right now, I think that the easiest way to find me is probably just on Twitter. Yeah, I'm kind of like, eventually get around to, like, actually making my blog somewhat official. But yeah, I'm on Twitter almost every day, unless I'm taking a break for some reason, for my own sanity, or mental health, all those things, because, like, yeah, we all need that. But yeah, so I'm definitely on Twitter at Tori Glass. And that's, if you for some reason want to follow me on Instagram, it's the exact same, at Tori Glass. And then, yeah, I think that, like, my blog, if you just want to link to, like, my blog,
definitely, absolutely,
click over to that. Yeah. I've got some other things on there, kind of on similar topics, so, as well. 'Cause yeah, I think that there's a lot of work that we need to do, and I think that, yeah, I just kind of want to encourage people, like, okay, well, like, let's do it. Let's stop talking about it and actually get something done. So,
yeah. Well, yeah, and I'll link to all of that so that everyone can find it straight from the show. So,
thank you.
Tori, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Thanks for sharing all you have.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.